forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of Bigger 10. I am Steve Dace, joined by my co-host, Aaron McIntyre. Aaron, good to see you again, brother. The season is drawing nigh. We are under 40 days until Big Ten football media days. The college football magazines are hitting the newsstands. NFL training camps are only about a month away. The most wonderful time of the year, brother, is almost here.
I have a question for you. You should be able to answer for me. How soon is too soon to bring like a 2-month-old to like a tailgate?
The answer is we don't even ask that question, Your Honor.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good to know.
I mean, provided that they are, it's not too warm.
Or too cold.
Or too cold,
Yep.
right? We are dealing
Like
with
an October day.
Yep,
Something like that.
vulnerable humans here, right?
Yep.
So, but as long as it's not too hot or too cold, then by all means, it's never too early to begin to absorb the greatness that is the most wonderful time of the year, brother. Never.
Oh, okay. Cool. Sounds like I might be going to the Wisconsin game and completely unrelated news.
Which is right around Halloween.
Yep.
Which could be like perfect weather.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we tend to have that early to mid-October, it's freezing here. And then like end of October, Indian summer is tend to how we tend to roll here in Iowa. So then again, the game's in Madison, so who knows? All right, well,
it is in Madison.
It is in Madison this year, yeah. So are you making the roadie? Is that?
No, there's some, I think it's Minnesota or somebody.
Oh, Minnesota. Okay.
Around October. I can't remember.
All right. So we had a different show planned here until a few days ago. And then, Aaron, we had a harmonic convergence. The people running college football decided, it's been 100 years. Let's try self-awareness. Let's give it a shot and see what we come up with. And they have unveiled a plan which, if you look at the amount of time they spent doing press conferences and interviews and everything else, they've said they've been working on this for 2 years. This is going to be the plan. There might be some minor tweaks. Andy Staples at The Athletic reported this week that the plan of having the quarterfinal games and the bowl games, that may get tweaked to now the teams that get first-round byes will get to play those games at home as well. But much of what was announced late last week is what the future of college football, and I think for the foreseeable future, starting in 2023, when this TV contract comes to an end and the new one begins, I think this is the shape of things to come. We're looking at a 12-team playoff, 6 automatic bids going to this highest-ranked conference champions, whether it's Power 5 or Group of 5, because there are 10 conferences overall. So, for example, last year, Coastal Carolina would have earned an automatic bid alongside Cincinnati. We would have had 2 Group of 5 teams getting automatic bids last year. So we're looking at 6 auto bids, which puts a huge emphasis on the regular season because that's the one way you can know for sure you play your way in. Puts a huge emphasis on conference championship games as well. Then there'll be 6 at-large bids that will be determined by the committee. Notre Dame is not permitted to be ranked in the top 4, but it is given direct access to the playoff in exchange with not having to join a conference by just being in the top 12. And anytime you're in the top 12, you're in it. But if you're ever number 1 or in the top 4 like you were last year, you cannot be one of the 4 teams that gets a bye because that only goes to teams that win their conference. So that was the concession that Notre Dame gave in order to make sure they had a path to the playoff while remaining an independent. The top 4 teams get first round byes. The next 4 teams, 5 through 8, that would be, 5 through 8, they would get to play at home on campus postseason games in college football, like Southern teams having to come north to play here, right? I mean,
Can you imagine the Bayou Bengals going up to Camp Randall?
Right.
Or TCF Bank Stadium.
Right? How about the U, Miami?
Yep.
Going to play a game at Ohio State in mid to late December.
Yep.
I mean, it's tough playing those guys in your crib, let alone up there where it's like a completely different ecosystem that time of year, right? So I'm you can tell, man, I'm really excited about this. I thought they didn't have the stones to go beyond 8. We're going to get into our overall top 5 here in a moment. It's all going to be playoff expansion related. Why I think all of the criticisms of this, or at least the criticisms of expanding the playoff, are all bad and all wrong. But just from an overall format standpoint, before we get into those 5 points we're going to address, give us your big picture thoughts when you heard about this.
So I tend to agree with most things that you said there. I don't think this can do anything but good things. You're going to have a completely different cast of characters for once in the postseason. You're going to have more postseason games that matter. You're going to have more regular season games that matter. You know, there's a temptation for a middling or upper echelon team that probably won't make the playoff, like a Wisconsin, going into sleepy Evanston. You know, Wisconsin just kind of slogs through it on their way to, go to the Big Ten championship game again. And Northwestern is like, we're Northwestern. Or Purdue. I know Northwestern is your crush. Or Purdue, some lower tier team like that. They're just kind of a slog towards the end of the season. There you go. Yeah, it's just a slog towards the end of the season.
I'm hurting.
Suddenly, David has a little bit more oomph behind him. I can keep this person from going to the playoff. And suddenly Goliath has a little bit more oomph to them as well. I got to crush this person to get home field advantage or at least have a chance. That's what we're talking about here. Every single preseason game or regular season game matters now. I think one of the biggest things that has already kind of come out a little bit, I can't remember who reported it, but it looks like a fair number of bowl games are going to go bye-bye.
Yeah, Brett Murphy thinks over at Stadium
as many as 10,
it could be at least 10. Yeah.
That's a great thing. And I say this as somebody who plays for the Iowa Fighting Outback Bowls. That's, I love the Outback Bowl, but that's a good thing. Make the postseason matter again. Here's what you could do, and we'll get into the top 5 criticism. Here's what you should do. I think outside of the playoff, have like something like 7 games or 7 bowl games, actual bowl games. I don't know which ones those would be, and that would be your top 25. The remainder of your top 25 for the rest of the year are those bowl games. And then if cities or companies want to sponsor, games, postseason games outside of that, they're invitationals. You can come. We'll give you a bunch of swag, something like that. That's how you could continue to improve. But overall, the playoff is going to be the granddaddy of the postseason, and I don't think really we should be complaining much after that. There's always going to be the conversation, so-and-so didn't get in over so-and-so did get in. That's always going to happen unless everybody is invited to the postseason. So overall, I think this is great, and we'll get into it more here in just a bit.
So let's get into some of the criticisms that are often spoken about expanding the playoff. And I want to start first with a meta, if we could, before we get into the specifics. Because one of the things I think we need to realize is that much, not all, there are some people that are really conscientious. One of them we'll address here in a minute, in their criticism of this. But the vast majority of the criticism of this playoff expansion is coming from people who would pride themselves as woke, that the players are victims. These free educations they're getting, that many Americans right now are defaulting on the student loans that they had to pay for to get that education. These free educations they're getting, the amount of free swag they're getting, the preferential treatment they get when it comes to on-campus activities, food, etc. That these players, regardless of that, they're victims. Any system that doesn't make them employees, which, by the way, is not a good deal for the players. One of these days, we should do a show on that. All right, wait until, there you go, make them all employees. Go tell that third-string right guard who's not playing. Hell, go tell the starting right guard who is playing. Wait till he finds out his scholarship, training table, because he's an employee now, all of this is taxable income. Suddenly, that ain't going to be as good of a deal as he probably thought that it was, okay? And he's not as marketable with an NIL as the starting quarterback is. You know what I'm saying? Or the team sucks and no one cares how good he is, or the quarterback, you're the right guard at Louisiana Tech, and you're just a middling, nice group of 5 team that wins 8 or 9 games, you know, in rural Indiana that no one watches every year. But that's all taxable income now.
Good
Okay,
luck paying that tax bill.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not a good deal for I want the players to get the best deal. To me, the best deal is for them to be exempted from taxation, while then also as contributors to the university, while getting a free education, but then getting to market themselves on the side. All right. And so they then determine what the tax bracket they want to be in is by what they're willing to market and who's willing to market them. To me, that's the best of both deals. All right. So I think a good portion, not all of it, but a good portion of this criticism is just frankly coming from people who have wokeified sports media. And so now players that get the adoring adulation of 100,000 people every Saturday, as well as world-class free educations, they're serfs now. They're Kunta Kinte now. They're on a plantation now. And so I think that level of wokeism is what is behind much, not all, but much of this criticism from a meta level.
Agreed. And I think the frustration and growing frustration with seniors, those who are projected to go early or even late in the NFL draft, sitting out their bowl games, sitting out their postseason games. I think when you add NIL on top of the expanded playoff, those types of things are going to go away because it's a little bit more worth it for these athletes to stick around. Now, I could be wrong. I could be wrong about that.
No, I think you're dead right
but
about that.
I think you give them added incentive to stick around. That makes the entire product better. That makes every single team, the locker rooms, even better. It's just the adding of the NIL here is key. That's something that we keep coming back to with every single meta conversation we have about college athletics, but especially college football, is getting NIL done, and that has to happen sooner or later.
It has to happen by July 1st because we've got several states going online July 1 if the NCAA has nothing by then. All right, let's get to the second point here. Let's get to now more specific criticisms. I thought it was fascinating. Barrett Silly over at CBS Sports, and I have a tendency on a lot of different angles to agree with him on a lot of different topics, but on this one, I think he is offering a false choice. He says that the playoff college football has chosen it's chosen access over excellence by expanding. Here's why I disagree with this. I think he has a flawed premise, Aaron. We didn't have a playoff to begin with. This was an invitational, meaning that if there was a certain amount, like if there was a formula, like they have in college hockey, which is a certain formula that selects and seeds the actual teams. All right, and that score, just everybody knows that that's the scoring system, and whoever the top teams are in that scoring system, that's who makes it, okay? If we had like an objective criteria, and we have a committee determines what that criteria is, fine, but then ultimately that criteria, like a net ranking in basketball, works itself out.
Yep.
All right, and then everybody knows all year long, by according to that objective criteria and its metrics, who have been the top 4 teams all along. And then at the end of the year, it just spits out those 4 teams. And that, to me, would be one thing. And then if you wanted to make the claim that we were participatory trophying this thing, I still wouldn't necessarily agree with it, but I think the argument would have a lot more merit. Because we don't have a playoff now. There is no objective criteria. Just unless you are a team coached by Nick Saban with a loss or less, like the year they got in without winning their division, for example. And then they ended up winning the whole thing, so they earned it, okay? But unless you're a team coached by Nick Saban with fewer than 2 losses, does anybody else know what the objective criteria is for making this playoff? Does anybody else know? No one else knows, okay? I mean, we all thought it would be guaranteed that a 1-loss Big Ten champion would make this tournament every single time, right? Ohio State already didn't make it once. And that was Ohio State, dude.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was a mid-tier brand had a breakthrough year and they left them home. This is our whole conference at this point.
It sounded really cool at first, but it ended up just being a 4-team BCS.
Yes.
And if you're going to have a BCS thing like that, just keep it the way it was, because at least there was some objective
Yes, at least we knew what
there.
that criteria was. This week now they just come out and retcon last week's explanation, and next week they'll reverse engineer what they just said this past week. It's a star chamber. So now we have a playoff. Now you know that half of this field knows there is something they can do every year to guarantee they will be in this field. And that is win your conference and be successful in the non-conference. Any Power 5 team that does that now is going to make this field. So I think that this is a huge step in actually, I think, affirming a meritocracy, because now there are legitimate achievements you have to achieve during the season to know for sure, to know for certain that you are in. So I don't think that we watered down the standard at all. I would argue we didn't have a standard. It was an invitational. This is actually the first step to a real playoff.
Yeah, in a typical year, there's probably one, maybe two teams that are way, way up here. The third team's kind of right there. And then, honestly, Steve, from a power rating perspective, not from necessarily college football playoff ranking perspective, is there really that much difference between teams 3 and 9?
No.
Every year? Is there that much?
How about 4 and 12?
4 and 12. Is there that much of a difference between teams, 10 and 12 to those at, 13 to 15? You see what I'm saying here? As long as if you're in those brackets, if you're in the top 12, really the top 20 or top 20, you're still conceivably playing for something at the end of the year. That doesn't necessarily just mean that's access. That means you're actually striving for something. In a typical season, finishing with a ranking of number 18 in the country, pretty good accomplishment for most teams. That's a disappointment for some, but for most teams, finishing number 15, 16, 17, 18, what are you playing for, though, at the end of the year? You likely did not make it to if you're in a Power 5 conference, you likely, with that ranking, probably didn't make it to your conference championship. What are you playing for at the end of the season? At the end of the season now, all I have to do is wait for maybe 1 or 2 losses, take care of business on my end, and I'm in. My ticket's punched. I may have to go on the road, but I'm in this. That actually increases excellence because it provides motivation.
You bet it does.
And competition as well. So that's, I think that choice is definitely flawed because of the reasons that we just laid out. When you increase access, you increase competition.
That's
and
right.
When you increase competition, the excellence will then follow.
That's exactly right. Let's go to the third issue we're hearing. This is going to water down the regular season. This one I don't understand for the life of me. How does offering more meaningful games water down the regular season? I don't understand that. I mean, now we're going to have more teams. Think about during the BCS era. How many times your favorite team and mine, Iowa and Michigan, were wanting to be that second Big Ten team in from the BCS, right? And we would find ourselves watching, like Thanksgiving weekend, Kansas State and Oklahoma State play. And we're like, and why are we watching this? Well, I mean, we love college football. There's the other reason we're watching this. One of those two teams we need to lose so our team can take that second spot in the BCS. You know what I'm trying to say? That we used to watch when the bowl bids mattered more. We watched a lot of other games for meaning because those outcomes would then impact our own team. We've gotten rid of that the last few years with this 14 playoff. Now
you're watching Alabama and Mercer or Alabama and Citadel.
I'm glad you brought that up. I would not be shocked if that SEC week that they have done for the last few years, if that actually goes away in the near future. Because from a strength of schedule, Alabama doesn't, as long as Nick Saban's coaching there, it doesn't matter if they're playing Mercer week 13 or if they're playing Georgia. But it matters to who wants to be the second, third, or maybe even fourth team from the SEC to get in. Well, now we start getting in from an at-large perspective. We start looking at strength of schedule components, right? So I think you're going to see this, and I think these teams, that's why we started seeing in the coming years, there's a lot of Power 5 and big name brand home and homes on the docket these next few years. I think they anticipated that the playoff was going to expand and that would lead to more of a strength of schedule component for additional at-large teams. So we're going to get a stronger regular season. You're going to get more non-conference matchups that matter. I think conference realignment is dead now because everybody can now, there's no league you could go to really unless you wanted to practice relegation, which is, I'm so tired of trying to beat Ohio State, I'll go play in the MAC. No one's going to do that to themselves, right? Okay? So barring that, There's no point to going to another league now for a path at the playoff. Everybody has an equal path now. They just have to exploit it. And so we're going to get better regular season matchups now. You're going to get better non-conference matchups now. You're going to get more home-and-home matchups now. Clemson, as long as South Carolina's terrible, they play that final rivalry game at the end of the year. Clemson isn't going to rest guys now, knowing that, hey, even if we lose this game and win the ACC, we're still in the playoff. If I lose this game, I don't get a bye. I got to play an extra week, and it might be on the road. This is the model that they use in the NFL, guys. And the NFL has the most impactful regular season in all of pro sports with no close second. So this doesn't water down the regular season at all. If anything, it elevates it. We're going to have more meaningful games, and there's even more emphasis now on winning your conference, Aaron.
Yep, and I couldn't really say it much better than that. This is one of the most head-scratching tropes that I've seen that actually involves the game. And the sport itself. This is one of the more head-scratching tropes. I'm not sure where this comes from. I really don't. I guess you're making the postseason more important. That doesn't necessarily mean with more importance that means the regular season is less important.
Right.
You're just bringing it kind of up to here a little bit. You're kind of leveling things out just a little bit. Making the postseason more impactful and more meaningful doesn't mean necessarily the regular season is less meaningful or less impactful. It's actually more so, if not just remaining the same. So it's a head scratching trope, and that's probably, of all of the criticisms I've heard of this one is the most doesn't make sense to me.
Now, this next one I've heard a lot of people even in favor of expanding the playoffs say, and I've never really heard the pushback that I'm about to provide against it. This idea that it will allow for more access, but it really won't generate more parity, and we'll probably just have, in the end, the same 3 or 4 teams winning it every year. That may be true for the first couple of years while we're still cycling through the current recruiting paradigm.
Yep.
In 1979, though, they introduced seeding into college basketball. The very next year, 1980, no number 1 seeds made the Final Four. In 1985, they expanded the tournament for the first time to 64, and no teams received first-round byes. That very first year, a number 8 seed won the tournament. A few years later, 2 years later, in 87, a number 6 seed won the tournament. In 1986, a number 11 seed made the Final Four. Meaning that, look at what happened in college basketball. The minute access was expanded, and keep in mind, this was all coming out of the Wooden era, where UCLA won 10 out of 12 championships from 1964 to 1975, I think it was. Coming right out of that era, the minute that they added more access, that sport became greatly democratized, meaning it wasn't just, and if it's not UCLA, then it's going to be like North Carolina or Kentucky winning it, right? So what would happen? Kids would go to the same 3, 4, 5 schools. The reason why they could just roll out Bill Walton after Lou Alcindor at UCLA is, dude, I'm going to sit as a freshman anyway in those eras without freshman eligibility. Might as well wait my time at UCLA if I'm Bill Walton, right? This is what's going on in college football right now. So Penn State and Michigan, I want to use those 2 as examples here, Aaron, because these are 2 of the 5 biggest brand names in the history of this sport. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Are they relevant on a national level whatsoever right now? No. Nope. And that's not even with the fact they both struggled last year. Throw out the COVID year. The previous 4 years, Penn State won 11 games, 3 out of 4 years, Aaron. And it wasn't really even in the playoff conversation any of those years. This is a top 5 brand in the sport. That's not a good thing. So right now at Ohio State in their quarterback room, they've got 3 consensus top 100 overall recruits in the quarterback room at Ohio State. Penn State has been looking for its quote-unquote franchise quarterback for going on 3 years since Trace McSorley left. If we had a democratized sport, so I ran a simulation on our Patreon page, and I went back over the last 25 years, and I found that with this model, 52% of the teams in college football got to make, not just in the Power 5, the whole sport, got to make at least 1 playoff appearance in 25 years, over half.
That's a really good thing.
Yes, it is. So what are right now, Ryan Day has We're seeing quarterbacks jump from one program to another. If I'm not starting at one of the, at any school outside of those top 4 or 5 programs, I'm out of here right away, right? What are the odds Ryan Day would be able to keep all 3 of those mega recruit quarterbacks in the same room when only one can play at a time, if indeed Penn State could go to that guy and say, well, we've made the playoff 3 of the last 4 years. We're just one quarterback away from going to zero's the answer.
Integers.
Zero's the answer. It's the reason why North Carolina doesn't know anymore that it's going to have a great point guard every year, because it doesn't have one sitting on the bench waiting 2 or 3 years for his turn. There's more democratization and migration of the talent. Now, are those teams going to always out-recruit everybody else? Yeah, but here's the problem. Michigan and Penn State have been averaging top 10 classes for the last 4 years, but the gap between them and Ohio State is widening. They're averaging top 10 classes, guys, and the gap is widening. It is not good for your Birmingham, Alabama is the #1 television market for college football, not New York, not LA, not Chicago, not Houston, not Philadelphia. Birmingham, Alabama. With all due respect to the people of Birmingham, that is not good for the future of your sport when that's the #1 television market of your sport. The West Coast of the country, where like 1/2 of the population of the country lives, they're not even paying attention. They're not even interested. That's not good either. So I think this will absolutely democratize the sport. I don't have to, if I'm DJ Uiagalelei, I was the #1 quarterback in high school. I left California to go sit a year behind Trevor Lawrence at Clemson. Am I going to do that when I know that USC's in the playoff every year too? I don't know. I still might. Clemson still might be better than USC, right? But am I going to think about it at least a little bit longer now? Hell yeah, I'm going to. This will democratize the migration of the talent. And because here's what's happening. With all due respect to your team, Iowa, you're a developmental program, fair?
Yep.
Okay. It's not good for the sport that all-time brand names, Michigan, Penn State, Texas, USC hasn't made the playoff. Guys, these are the programs that built this sport. They're not nationally relevant. We're talking some of the biggest fan bases on planet Earth, regardless of sport. And they're just not even invested in this. That ain't a good business model. And so they had to do this in order to provide more access, because it wasn't just you're destroying your middle class. You're already doing that with the programs like the Iowas and the Wisconsins of the world. Now you're destroying your upper class that have been carrying your sport for decades. That ain't a good business model, Aaron.
Yeah, so the way, in terms of the talent food chain, the way that it has worked until now, and it started to change a little bit with the transfer portal. It'll be accelerated by NIL, and then it'll be accelerated a little bit more with the college football playoff. It was usually the talent food chain was usually from the bottom up, meaning the talent came from the bottom up, meaning in Ohio State, crap, we need a new left tackle. All right, that guy at Wisconsin, he looks good. Come play for us. And then down at, and at a level like Iowa looks at FCS Northern Iowa saying, we need a new left tackle or a new linebacker. You're going to play for us. Instead now, where there are gluts of talent at certain positions, that's going to start flowing down. 5-star wide receiver from Minneapolis is in a recruiting battle. It's between Minnesota and Ohio State. Decides, you know what, I really think it's going to be best for my career to prove myself at the highest level at this level. I'm going with Ohio State. Minnesota makes the is the 12th seed in the playoff the very next year. This guy's sitting behind Olave or whoever is the next generation wide receiver at Ohio State and says, you know what, I can actually compete at the highest levels back at home. I'm going to go back. Those types of things will become more and more common because you're giving people a less and less of an incentive to stock up and glut their talent at one position. And I don't know how that's a bad thing.
There's something like 30, 31, or 32 5-star recruits, according to the 24/7 composite in the 2021 recruiting class, okay? Mm-hmm. 21 of them went to 4 schools.
That's not good.
That's not good, guys. That's not good. which, we opened with a meta. Aaron, let's close with one. I think what we need to understand is once we went to any form of a playoff, even if it was an invitational, then your regular season needs to be an acknowledgement of that fact. What's happened the last few years, we've always been a sport dominated by dynasties, right? That's why we have these blue bloods, okay? But we've never had an oligarchy, meaning that you had Pete Carroll in USC, Bobby Bowden in FSU, you had the U with Miami, you had Ohio State with Woody Hayes, and then Jim Tressel and Urban Meyer, Notre Dame with Lou Holtz, and then before that, Ara Parsegian, Frank Leahy, Knute Rockne. There was maybe a singular team or two that would dominate for a time and then eventually come back to earth, right? We have a full-fledged oligarchy.
Yep.
We have 3 to 5 teams. If you want to throw Georgia in there, they're recruiting like those other teams. They just don't win as many playoff games. They are acquiring and accruing a level of talent way ahead of everyone else. Way ahead.
Part of that is demographics.
Part of it is, and then the other part of it is they also then are the only ones that can go back. I mean, we've had 28 playoff spots in 7 years. 21 of them have gone to the same 4 teams: Oklahoma, Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama. So we've had the worst of both worlds the last few years. We've had a non-playoff that was an invitational and very subjective. So an Alabama team, yes, they did win the championship. They had no top 25 wins that year. Not a single one. Not a single one. They get in without winning their division and with no quality wins over an Ohio State team with 1 loss who won the Big Ten championship outright. Okay? So we have an entirely subjective process. But then we're still behaving like it's the same college football with these dynasties, except now we've created like this Politburo oligarchy of superiors to everyone else. If we're going to go to a playoff, then we needed to adjust our regular season accordingly, which means the regular season needs to be done in acknowledgement of the kind of postseason you have. The previous postseason with college football was very muddled. We'd have 1 clear or 2 teams that would clearly claim they were playing for a national championship or capable of being it. And if we were lucky, they would play each other in a bowl game. And if not, we'd have a split title and argue about it. But the regular season was constructed in acknowledgement of this. But now we're supposed to have a national playoff system. We haven't. We've talked about that, but that was the branding, right? Mm-hmm. Therefore, the regular season needs to be done in accordance of this. Now, we probably can't do systematic scheduling and stuff like the NFL does. So what can we do? We can provide greater access with some objective accomplishment in order to reach the playoff so that my regular season has meaning. So that if my favorite team loses the first week of the year, in a big non-conference game, and then they lose a second week of the year, I'm like, well, what's the point of this year? We were preseason number 8 or 9. We've already got 2 losses. We had no shot. What am I watching the next 2 months for? That's a terrible business model. We needed to construct a postseason and a regular season that were symbiotic of each other, not in conflict with one another. This actually does that. And I think it's in accordance with the most successful pro sports model of all time, the NFL. And so therefore, I don't see why that's a bad thing.
Agreed. And I would even say that, the formulaic scheduling that you mentioned there a little bit ago, I even think that is possible. I think down the road, I think you'll start to see conferences go into 4-6 year agreements with each other that they don't know who's going to play whom, but they just know that we're going to have matchups based on how you finished in your division or your conference. Should we get rid of divisions? I think there are still improvements that can be made, but for right now, this is this should exceed people's expectations as far as what we've gotten my entire life, going back to the BCS and especially the last few years. I think this should exceed your expectations. It's not going to happen overnight. It'll take 3 or 4 years before we really start to see some results that we're really getting a little bit more randomness. And randomness is good because that's entertaining for us and it gives even more opportunity. But it's going to be a few years before we start to see some more randomness with the actual football playoff. But I don't think this is anything but a good thing.
We'll come back. We'll play our weekly game of Would You Rather next. All right, back here on Bigger 10. Aaron, let's play a little Would You Rather, and you get to go first. I've got this one for you. If you were Notre Dame, would you rather remain independent, even if it means never having a first-round playoff bye, no matter how good you are, so you're always playing the extra game, even if you're the clear number one team, or join a conference full-time for a chance to be one of those top 4 seeds?
I would definitely remain independent. You've got the best of both worlds right now. The question then becomes, you mentioned this earlier, relegation. What's stopping somebody else from going independent? Like a BYU, again, if they're not already.
They still are.
Independent. What would stop Texas even from going independent, if you catch my drift? Then, hey, Notre Dame just gets to make it every year. Why can't we do the same thing? We'll schedule some Big 12 opponents in there. Why can't we do that? That's the kind of the problem that I see a little bit down the road. But for right now, if I'm Notre Dame, stay independent, schedule a few cupcakes in between the larger actual cakes that you get from the ACC, and make the playoff every year. Next one for you. Would you rather be a big fish in a group of 5 conference or a medium fish in a Power 5 conference related to the playoff?
We're talking about the forthcoming format. I think I'd rather be the medium fish in the Power 5 conference now. I just think there's more opportunity for you there now, because I think we have turned back to the conversation we just had. We've turned the Michigans and Penn States of the world, the Texases of the world, the Texas A&Ms of the world. Guys, these are schools with budgets and endowment funds greater than countries in Latin America, okay? And we've turned these schools into the second tier, okay? So I think that I'd rather be those schools, because you are now going to see, and I'm totally okay with it. Well, what if I heard this argument, we should have brought this up last segment. Well, what if a 9-3 team gets in and then wins the playoff? You mean, what if a team gets in as the 10th, 11th, 12th seed with the lowest seeds, has the the hardest road to the championship, and beats all the other teams we rated better than them? And you're complaining about a lack of meritocracy? They just won it on the field against all the teams that we rated better than them. Aaron, why is that not affirming a meritocracy? They won it on the field, man. What's wrong with that?
Apparently something, I guess.
I don't know what it is, but for some, it's wrong, I guess. All right, one more for you here. Would you rather the Big Ten keeps divisions or gets rid of them?
And I say this fully understanding the shirt that I'm wearing right now. Get rid of them, because we have a 12-team playoff. In fact, I think I've said this on the show before. Maybe if not on the show, I know I've said it before. I'm in favor of getting rid of divisions so long as we go at least to an 8-team or 12-team playoff. Because you can't tell a team now, if they would have expanded to 8 teams and we get rid of divisions, that probably would have been the worst of both worlds for teams like Iowa. But now there's still that carrot out there. It's still probably going to be about as rare as it usually is for Iowa being in the upper echelons, but that's okay. I think getting rid of divisions, like we've seen in the Big 12, that ensures as much as you can, a competitive and meaningful conference championship game. I would love to see, even if it's back-to-back, if Michigan comes back someday and beats Ohio State in the game, wouldn't you like to see them turn around the next week and play, or 2 weeks later and play Ohio State again? Well, I know you wouldn't, but I think the rest of the world would. So things like that, scenarios like that, where you're truly taking the 2 best teams. And if Indiana, let's say, continues its upward trajectory, I can't really foresee a time when they're going to be better than Ohio State in the East Division. But let's say they're 9-3, and the best West team is 8-4. I would rather see Indiana play Ohio State than I would an 8-4 Northwestern or an 8-4 Wisconsin. I would like to see an 8-4 Iowa, but that's beside the point. You get what I'm saying. Get the best teams in the championship game. That's going to further continue to improve and make them regular season more.
I think you are. I think divisions will be gone everywhere in college football, actually.
All right, last one for you. Would you rather open the season with a conference game or a cupcake?
So I have differing. I have I'm not sure how to answer this because, growing up for me, Michigan and Notre Dame was like the game that kicked off the college football season every year, right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, the two winningest teams, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. And so, Bo used to always say that they never had an issue with off-season motivation and preparation when everybody knew the schedule started with Notre Dame and not Central Michigan, okay? On the other hand, though, I can remember a lot of times you'd be so psyched up and everything for that game all off-season long, and then if you lost it, like you wait 9 months to play a game and it's that game against that team, and if you lose, it just felt like you got kicked in both your stones, So I think I'll still go with because we don't have a preseason. I'd rather go with a cupcake and get a lot of things ironed out that you would be able to do during a preseason. And now, they're changing the rules again about how much you can even scrimmage with pads and everything else.
Yep.
There's not going to be a lot of hitting and stuff going on before the season begins, at least not if people obey NCAA rules. Yeah. So I think maybe I'd be more inclined to start with a cupcake if I was a coach, just to, have a glorified preseason game. Although as a fan, this trend we've had the last few years of this conglomerate of notable week one games has been a hell of a fun way to kick the season off, So as a fan, I say let's go with the conference game. But as a coach, I think I'd probably rather start with the cupcake.
Understood.
That's a good question, though. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up with this week's Twitter results and more. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, do you approve of the 12-team expansion plan for the college football playoff? I guess there wasn't as much resistance as we thought, because about 85% said, yes, we do approve, and only 15% gave the wrong answer, which was no. That brings us to our feedback of the week. And this is this graphic from Big Maple Fan Club. He tweeted this out in response to our point last week, Aaron, that Ohio State has not lost a regular season college football game since, get this, October 20th, 2018. That is the last time they lost a regular season game, Aaron. And it was against Purdue when Rondale Moore went insane. Yep. And it was, I remember it was a dedication game. It wasn't the young man with cancer. They ended up passing away after that. But our follower there tweeting out a graphic of the scoreboard when we mentioned that. If I would have said after that game, guys, I think in a couple seasons, Jeff Brom's going to be on the hot seat. People would have thought I was nuts, right? But that does seem to have been kind of the peak moment for the Purdue football program under his watch so far. It's a big year, I think, for him.
Agreed.
All right, so a lot of fun on this program. Hopefully you had fun watching it as well. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, share, 5-star review, whichever the case may be, whether it's on YouTube or iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play, so video, audio, what have you. Please keep doing those things and help us get the word out about what we do each week here on Bigger 10. You can follow us each day on Bigger 10 at Bigger 10 on Twitter to keep up to date on what we think about all things Big 10 and more. And until the next time, he's Aaron, I'm Steve. We'll see you next time right here on Bigger 10.